All right. Good evening, folks. I am so sorry about this last week. I have been under the weather since Sunday and woke up Monday morning, knew very quickly that I was not going to be able to make it, and got word to Brother Decker as quick as I possibly could. I hope I didn't inconvenience anybody. Nobody had to make special plans. But I did tell him that I would record Monday night's class and then pass it on as quick as possible. And today is the first day that I've actually felt good enough to get out and do anything. I came to church last night. Probably shouldn't have, but today I felt good enough to go ahead and record this class. Let's go ahead and get started. If you want to go ahead and turn to chapter 19. We stopped in chapter 18, and Abraham at that point was seeing off the two angels. The Lord remained behind with Abraham, but the two angels continue on to Sodom, and Abraham is talking with God, and we see where it appears that Abraham is bargaining with God, and I don't really see this as bargaining. I think really what this is Abraham is appealing to the Lord for mercy. I think this shows the character of Abraham, certainly, in the fact that he essentially prostrates himself before God. He extols God's mercy and his magnificence and his wonder and his splendor, and he basically debases himself. And that, I don't mean that in a hurtful, ugly way, but he makes very clear to the Lord how he understands the standing between the two of them. God is the superior, Abraham is the inferior, and this is the inferior appealing to the superior for mercy for a group of people who don't desire it for themselves. These are people who have gone into sin and gone into error. And Abraham is saying, Lord, you're a merciful God. Would you destroy this, all of these people, this entire city? Would you destroy it for 50 people? And, the Lord says, I won't do it for 50. Well, would you do it for 40? And every single time, Abraham makes sure that God knows, I am nothing but dust and ashes. But would you spare it for 30? And God keeps coming back and saying, no, I won't. This shows the character of God as well. God is not desiring that any should perish, but all should come to repentance. The issue here is that the people of the cities of the plain have given up their opportunity for repentance. They've ceased to have any kind of desire to act in a way that is pleasing to God. All right, they've rejected him in virtually every way. We're going to see that here in just a couple of moments. So the Lord wants Abraham in chapter 18, verse 17 through 19. The Lord wants Abraham to know about the punishment of the cities on the plain. This corresponds to the land of Canaan, right? God's going to destroy them due to their sin, as an example to witnesses about his righteousness and mercy. And we think about why mercy. Well, because they are no different than the animals in that way. They've given up any semblance of understanding or desire for good, and they've become basically like debased animals. But God makes this promise, and it's not a bargain. God strikes a promise with Abraham. He says, I will not destroy the city if there's 10 people found. Well, the next thing we see, I want to look at this real quick, and this is something that I said we were going to talk about this on Monday, and I want us to look at this. This is the hospitality code. You will see this in peoples from the ancient Near East, which is what we call modern day Middle East. So the ancient Near East, Canaan, not so much Egypt. That this code of conduct really didn't carry that far down that direction. But as far as Mesopotamia and eastward, this code of conduct of hospitality. And we'll look at a couple of these examples. Number one, it was a matter of honor. It was a sacred duty from the host to the visitor. It was sacrosanct. It was not to be broached or breached in any way, shape, or form. All right. The host, the person who took the visitor in, was a servant to the guest. Now, this would not be the case if the person was of lower social class. We need to make sure that wasn't the case. But even then, there was an obligation to be met. Odds are that the person who was of a lower social class would not ask for this. They would not see themselves as worthy of being truly honored guests in someone's home. But when the social class was equal, or maybe there was a higher class, the host was the servant to the guest. All right. There was nothing to be expected or received in exchange for hospitality. There was always going to be something that was going to be extended to the guest, but when there would be no attempt made on the part of the guest toward the host. There would not be a, hey, let me reimburse you for this. That would be unthinkable. It would be a broach of social etiquette if that were to occur. All the needs of the guest were to be met. No, there was no ifs, ands, or buts in regards to that. All the needs of the guests were to be met. That means that food would be provided, their animals would receive shelter and watered and fed. The guests would be provided even changes of clothing if that was necessary, if the issue was there that was needed. There would be water and servants provided to wash their feet. Food would be provided at any time of the day or night. And you remember this when Jesus is actually recounting one of his parables, when he says a man had gone to bed, and then one of his neighbors comes and knocks on his door, and he says, I've had visitors from afar away, and they're in my house. Give me food. I don't have any food to lay before them. Get up and give me food. This would have been something that these people probably had experienced. Somebody's coming to visit. You didn't call ahead. You didn't even send a message ahead. You just sort of came to town. If they were your kinsmen, you received them, and then you would be responsible for them. So here's this guy being awoken in the middle of the night, which might be as late as 12 o'clock. I know for us, we think, wow, 12 o'clock. These people went to bed when the sun went down, at least somewhat after that. So now they have food that they have to provide for their guests, and water or wine or whatever it may be, they would be provided for. So all of their needs would be met. And this includes this last part, and this is essential to understanding what we see in Genesis chapter 19. The guest's safety was in the hands of the host, and their lives could be forfeit if something happened to that guest. I mean, I think we would probably understand that now. It would be less likely that would be a problem for us, but we don't live in lands that are hostile to us for the most part. We have a police force, we have a military, we have people that generally keep us safe in our own homes. But I would like to think that if somebody was in your home and all of a sudden there was some sort of an entry to be made into the home, that we would protect the people that are there. We would certainly protect our family members. And then, of course, that falls into what we're going to see here in Genesis chapter 19. So your life could be forfeit if you took in a guest or his wife, his children, your guest and their servants and all of their stuff. If something happened to them, your life could be demanded in exchange for theirs if something happened to them while they were staying with you. All right, now I want to stop real quick. I want to make sure that this is recording. I'm trying something new, so just bear with me for just a moment. I'm going to check something, and I'll be right back. Okay, we'll start up again. All right, very good. It is happening exactly the way I hoped it was. Forgive the intrusion. Let's continue on. All right, so let's go to chapter 19. All right, the two angels that left Abraham and the Lord while he was speaking to them, they come to Sodom in the evening. In verse 1, and Lot is sitting in the gate of Sodom. And this is, we see this quite often. As a matter of fact, in the parable of the righteous woman, it talks about her husband sits in the gates of the city. Not just anyone could sit in the gates of the city. This was typically an honorific that was given to men who had achieved a certain social status. They were considered to be either wealthy. They could be people who were guests of honor. They were those who were well regarded within the town of that the gates belonged to. And we think about the idea of the gates, and this is something that we don't really have in the cities. Of course, we don't typically have walled cities or even gated cities anymore. We might have gated communities. But these cities would typically have some sort of rudimentary fortification around them. And even if there wasn't, there would be a place where the main road would come in and you would enter into the main courtyard or square of town, and this is where you would be oftentimes if you would come into town. You could stop at the gates and ask where you might find a particular person or a particular thing, a merchant, or where would be a good place to stay, so forth and so on. So Lot is sitting in the gate of Sodom. And what does this mean? We think about the idea of not only where is the gate of the city, what does this mean when it says that Lot is sitting in the gates of the city? You know, we spoke 2 weeks ago, or a little over a week ago, about Lot had essentially given up the idea of being a sojourner dwelling in tents outside with his goods. Don't know what happened to his servants and his flocks. It could be that he decided that the life of a shepherd is just not for him anymore. He wanted to move uptown. He wanted to be a metropolitan. And he could be that he sold all of that, became very wealthy. Of course, he had a great many goods. And then he became very wealthy and became a rich merchant in town. Or maybe he even essentially retired and didn't feel the need to work anymore. He had given up everything, and now he was wealthy, lived in town. And of course, by doing so, he would be regarded as one of the wealthier citizens, and he would be afforded a place at the gates. So he's sitting in the gate of Sodom, and he sees them. He rose to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And why he did this versus anyone else did this, it could be that last vestige of humility and deference towards others. And we'll see in just a few minutes, we're going to talk about what was the sin of Sodom. Was it homosexuality? That was one of the sins. I believe that sin came from the other sins. But it's interesting that he was the one that greeted these two men. He says, "My lords, please turn aside to your servant's house." He's offering this hospitality that we just read about. Spend the night and wash your feet, and then get up in the morning and go on your way. Now, he doesn't know that they're passing through. He does know that they're not citizens of that town. So they are certainly visitors. Now, whether they were planning on moving anywhere else or they were decided to set up their residence there, we don't know. But he makes this offer of hospitality, and they said, "No, we're going to spend the night in the town square." Now, not knowing who they are, at this point, Lot becomes worried, and he says, "No," but he pressed them strongly, and I think that's a point to be made. The problem with him staying in the town square is the same as it was for that for the man that we find in Judges, that goes and decides he and his prostitute, or his not prostitute, I'm sorry, his concubine and his servant going to stay in the town square of the city after he had gone and brought back his wife from her father's house. And there's a man there that says, "No, it's not safe to stay in the town square." And it's probable that this is the same thing. Lot knows what happens in the town square after the lights go out. It's a common theme in biblical literature that it's never good after dark. Bad things happen after dark. Bad things happen under the cover of darkness. Even though the Lord sees them, that's when people think they can get away with bad things. So he said he pressed them strongly, and he says, so they did. They acquiesced. They went into his house, and he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread as would be proper for him to do so. And they ate. But before they lay down, it was not time yet to go to bed. So before they turn aside, we'll see what happens. So I want to get to this last point. Sodom and Gomorrah would have been for the time considered to be very metropolitan and cultured. They would have a music scene, they would have an art scene, they would have a social scene. And I think what happens here is you've got wealthy, bored men looking for something to do. Now we have been caught up in the idea of a great many untruths that have been told about homosexuality, that it is a genetic thing, it cannot be helped, and it's not something to be ashamed of. And we know that not to be the case. It is something that is a repellent thing before God. It is an abomination before God. It is a turning aside of the natural order of things. And while there are many, many young men and young women who have been lured into it and drawn into it because of various social things that are going on in their lives, we see that here are a group of men that are going about doing these things because of a greater issue that we see in just a little bit. And we'll get to that here in just a moment. So I want you to keep that in mind as we see what's getting ready to unfold in the last part of this. So before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the men, all the people to the last man. So if we take modern day thinking and we say, well, this is all a genetic thing, we're talking about all of the men of the city, from all of them, young and old, all of the people to the last man. So every single man in that town was actually genetically homosexual, yet they all were married and had children and engaged in all of the stuff that goes along with typical life. That's not what we find. We find a group of guys who were bored and arrogant and violent. You see what's getting ready to happen to them, what's ready to happen to what they want to do to these two men and to Lot and his family. So I think we need to take that into consideration when we look what's going to happen, all right? All right, so this righteous Lot, now he's called righteous, right? He's called righteous. Lot takes this hospitality to a horrifying level. He's engaging in hospitality toward these two men. What does he do? He offers up his own two daughters to the men in exchange for the safety of these two. I want to make sure I said this right. He offers up his two daughters to the men of the city in exchange for the safety of these two men that have come into his house. He says he goes out to the men in the entrance. He shuts the door behind him. So now he's the only man. Now this is an act of bravery on his part, but it takes an appalling turn here in just a moment. He says, I beg you, my brethren. He calls them his brethren, which is an appalling thing in and of itself. He says, I beg you, my brethren, do not act so wickedly. Why is he calling these wicked men his brethren? Has he become so debased that these are the people that he considers brethren, not the men out on the plain who are living simple, nomadic, tribal lives? These men in this house and in this city are now his brethren. He said, behold, I have two daughters who have not known any men. Let me bring them out to you and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof. So he offers up his own two daughters to the men in exchange for the safety of these two angels. Now, still not knowing that they're angels. They're strangers that have come into his house. I want to give Lot the benefit of the doubt, but I can't. I cannot do this. I would have told these two men not to leave. I just said, look, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to defend my family. I invite you to defend yourself, but we're not going down without a fight. I'm coming at this from a standpoint of 20/20 hindsight, but this is just this is an appalling turn of pace. So the angels are likely very attractive, likely physically attractive, which is entirely probable. The men wanted them in their wickedness. But I want you to look at this. Look what he says. They said, stand back. They said, this fellow came to sojourn. So in spite of everything that he's done, his prominence in the community comes to nothing at the end of the day. This fellow comes to sojourn, and now he has become the judge of us. Now we will deal worse with you than with them. So now the object of their violence and aggression has become Lot. He said, now we're going to deal with you. Now then we're going to deal with these two men that we've come to take by force. And then we're going to deal with your two daughters. So this has nothing to do with simply the attraction of man towards man in some sort of a loving fashion. This is an act of an appalling aggression and physical violence. This is the desire to harm and to do harm and to debase themselves and to debase the people that they come in contact with. So they press against him and they attempt to break in order to assault the entire family. So you've got a wife, you've got two daughters, you've got these two men and Lot that are all going to suffer violence because of the sin and the wickedness of the people. So look what he says. They press hard against the man, Lot, and draw near to break the door down. They reached out to Lot and brought Lot into the house with them. The men, the two angels, opened the door, grab Lot, bring him in, shut the door, and brace the door against these men. It says they struck with blindness the men who were at the entrance of the house, both small and great, so they wore themselves out groping for the door. I want you to look at this, and I want you to look at this in context of 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 18. The same word is used, but the idea is not simply that the fact that they can't see. It's understood in 2 Kings, the idea of confusion or disorientation. They know where they are, but it's almost like being, has anybody ever had vertigo? I liken it to a seriously bad form of vertigo. They can't see what's going on, in the sense that, it's like you reach out for something, but you see the doorknob, but you can't grab a hold of it. You see the entrance to the door, but you can't open it out. And but think about it. If that had happened to me, what would I have done? I would have retreated. And anybody reasonable would have retreated as soon as that happened to them. But they were so violent, and they were so desirous of doing harm, that they keep reaching out for the door and can't find the door. All right, you have to forgive me. I'm going to be talking, and I'm probably going to lose my voice a little bit as we go. All right, so let's go. Look what happens. The angels warn Lot. He says, if you have any family here, anyone else, sons-in-law, sons, daughters, do you have anyone else in the city, bring them out of the place. We're getting ready to destroy the place because of it, of the behavior that's on ample display. And you have to wonder, did Lot ever see this before? Is this something that has happened before? Has he had to protect other people because of this? Has he been on the gates of this city and warned people, look, do your business in town while it's daylight? But listen, as soon as it gets dark, you need to go home. Unless you have a place to go, you need to get out of town. You just wonder. But this is what he has given himself up to. This is what he is. He's attached his wagon to this, so to speak. All right. So he goes in and he finds his, I think this tells us that he had other daughters. I don't believe the two daughters that are living with him are betrothed to these people that are called the sons-in-law in verse 14. I believe that he had other children that have now attached themselves to this town. They are now part and parcel of the wickedness and the degeneracy that's going on in Sodom. So he goes and says to his son-in-law who were to marry his daughters, up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city. So up, get out of this place. But he seems to his sons-in-law to be jesting. They give Lot all night to try, and he's unable to save anybody. This kind of reminds you of Noah, doesn't it? How long did he preach and was unable to save anybody besides his own flesh and blood? So they demand that he leave with his wife and his daughters. So they bring him out and they set him outside the city. I like in verse 16 it says, but he lingered. He lingered. And you wonder, is he looking around and seeing that he probably might have lived in a very elegant house. If he was very wealthy, he probably lived in a very nice house. You wonder if he's looking around, seeing all of his possessions and realizing he can't take them with him. I don't know if it necessarily means that he wouldn't go, but he just sort of is looking behind, thinking about things, and should I take this with me? What is important to me? And at the end of the day, what does he escape with? He escapes with his wife. He escapes with his two daughters, and it says the angels take them by the hand and they set him outside of the city. Now I don't know if they walked him out or if they, did some sort of a dematerialization and brought him. I don't know, but whatever it is, they get him far enough outside of the city that he's going. He's not going to go back for anything. Now it's time to move. They said, now we have a job to do. You need to move. And let's look what he says. Escape for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the hills, lest you be swept away. Now, I want to go forward. They tell him to leave the city. Do not look back or stop anywhere. He says, oh no, my lords, behold, your servant has found favor in your sight. Verse 19, you've shown me great kindness, but I cannot escape to the hills, lest the disaster overtake me and I die. I don't know if this is Lot just misunderstanding what's going to happen, which is entirely probable. He doesn't know what they're going to do to the cities. Are they going to go into and destroy just the people and leave the city standing? Maybe that's what he's thinking. I'll get to come back to the city. All the people will be dead. The wickedness will be dead, but I'll get to come back. And they said, no, we're going to utterly destroy everything. He says, this city is near enough to flee to, and it's a little one, and he allows him to go to Zoar. And the angels allow it through, they speak on behalf of God. They allow him to do that. And they said, go. And he said, I'll grant you this favor also, that I will not destroy the city of which you have spoken. All right. So they say, flee to the mountains. He said, no, I'm going to go to this town, if that's okay. They said, that's fine. So I want to go back. Hold on a second. Let me, all right. Let me go back. No, I'll tell you what, never mind. I thought I knew what I was going to say, but I'm not. So verse 23, the sun had risen on the earth when the lot came to Zoar. Then the Lord rained down on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord. I want you to understand that Sodom and Gomorrah stand for the 5 cities. Now, he didn't destroy Zoar. That's one of the cities of the plain that he did not destroy. But the rest of the 4 he did destroy. Okay, so Sodom and Gomorrah were probably the 2 biggest, maybe the most wicked of the cities, but they really stand for all of the cities on the plain. God destroys all of those. He overthrew those cities and all of the valley and all of the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. So what God did was basically turn it into a parking lot. There's nothing left. There's no towns. There's no animals. There's no vegetation. There's no people. There's no anything. So in the old days, in the days of Noah, where he used water to utterly destroy everything, in this case, he used fire and brimstone to utterly destroy everything. And he overthrew those cities, what grew on the ground. And I want you to look at verse 26. Do not look back. Lot was warned not to look back. In verse 26, it says, but Lot's wife behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Now, what I do not want to do is read more into the text than there is. If we read the text, it says she became a pillar of salt. What do we look at? What do we take from that? That when she looks back over her shoulder, that she becomes a pillar of salt. If we looked at it in those terms, it would stand the way that it is. But I want you to look at Luke verse 17, Luke chapter 17, verses 31 and 32. His wife looks back. In Luke 17, verse 31 and 32, I want to let me pull that up real quick. I'm working with several different things here, trying to. Luke 17 verses 31 and 32 tells us this. So I'll read 30, 31, and 32. So will it be on the day when the Son of Man is revealed. On that day, let the one who is on the housetop with his goods in his house. That sounds familiar. How do you think that Lot and his wife felt? They're standing there. They're being told by these men that they have to leave. He says, let the man who is on the housetop with his goods in the house not come down to take them away, and likewise let not the one who is in the field not turn back. Remember Lot's wife. Whoever seeks to preserve his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life will keep it. I want you to think about that in terms of this. If we think about it in those terms, the idea of simply turning around and looking at the destruction, or is it looking back with the idea of did Lot's wife not just glance backward over her shoulder, as we're often led to believe, or did Lot's wife think that I'm going to go back? There's something in there. I want to go back. Maybe she wanted to retrieve something special from the house. Could it be something, a special memento? Could it be wealth? I have portable goods like gold and silver. I should go back and take some of those. Could have been a household god. The little household gods that Rachel and Leah took from their father's house. Could that be the case? It was a moment, maybe it was a moment of disbelief. It wasn't really going to happen. Maybe it was just simply a profound longing for the society where she was Lot's wife. She was somebody of importance. And now all of that uptown living is about to come crashing down, and there's nothing that she can do about it. You notice that it said she became a pillar of salt, she wasn't turned into a pillar of salt. And I'll tell you something that I've read, and you can look at this yourself if you want to. uh, where the plane was in that area, there is a wind that comes down through, blows over the Dead Sea, which is is predominantly dissolved salt. And it says that things that are in that plane, if left there long enough, will turn into salt. Now, I'm not saying that she stood there and salt covered her. I'm saying that did she go back down into that town, was destroyed in that destruction, and like everything else that was in that plane, eventually become covered over with a slow wind of salty water. I don't know. I'm trying to maybe bring something new to the discussion that you might not have thought of. I think most people, when we think about this, is they were forbidden to look back because something bad would happen to them. I don't believe the idea of looking back here simply means taking a look backwards. I think it means the idea of turning around with the idea of going back to where we were, much like we find in Luke chapter 17. Okay, so just take that for what it is, and nothing more. Okay, I just want to make sure you understand that. All right, so let's go back. Let's go back to wait a second. Bear with me. Okay. Now let's think about this. Well, let's finish up and then we'll get into what my other point was. Lot and his daughters, right, make their way to Zoar. And it says they dwelled there for a little while. Don't know how long. They may have been persona non grata in Zoar. They weren't welcome in Zoar. It could be that Lot has seen the wickedness of Zoar and says, how long is it going to be before God destroys this city as well? So eventually they leave and they make their way to the mountains like God told them to in the first place. So he was afraid to live in Zoar. So he lived in a cave with his two daughters. And the firstborn said to the younger, now we don't know how long after this occurred. This could have been several months. It could have been several years later. And it could be that Lot saying, I don't want you to go down there. And the girls are thinking, well, you know, the men that we were going to marry or could have married are gone. We're two women. It's not safe for us to travel. Lot's like, I'm not going anywhere. I've seen what God can do. I don't want to go anywhere else. Why Lot did not make his way back to his kinsman with Abraham, I do not know. It could be that he thought that he would not be welcomed. I'm not sure. What would Abraham's thoughts been had Lot made his way back to him? I think he would have welcomed him with open arms, but that's not what we find. He lives in this cave, and his two daughters, likely forbidden to go back to Zoar because of Lot's fearful nature. Now they have no way of continuing their family. They realize they're going to die childless. They have no husbands to carry on the bloodline, no husbands to take care of them. Lot has become essentially what we would consider to be a hermit, so they have to make a plan. So the firstborn says to the younger, verse 31, the firstborn said to the younger, our father is old, there's not a man on earth to come into us after the manner of all the earth. In other words, there's no husband for us. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him that we may preserve offspring from our father. So they made their father drink wine that night. That means literally they made him drunk. He did not know what he was doing. Did Lot know what he was doing in getting drunk? Probably. Did he know what was going to happen to him? No, certainly not. The firstborn went in and lay with their father, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. So he was an innocent party to this. It was a wicked thing to do, but he was an innocent party to it. He was essentially raped. I mean, you don't think about that too often for a woman to rape a man, but that is what happened. This is a profound ignorance on the part of these two young ladies, but their father is not doing for them what he should have been doing for them. He should have at least taken them back to the land of their origin, at least to the Babylonian land, and found a husband for them there. But he's done nothing for them. He's not been a very good father. Did not excuse their behavior, though. All right. So the next day, the firstborn said to the younger, behold, I lay last night with my father. Let us make him drink wine again tonight. Then you go lie with him, that we can have offspring from our father. So they made their father drink wine that night as well. So 2 nights in a row, Lot's being made drunk so that their 2 daughters can go in there and rape their father so that they could have children from him. And it's interesting, there's nothing said about any kind of consequences either for the young women or for Lot. Truthfully, Lot is really not mentioned again in the present tense from this point on. We don't see anything from him. He just sort of disappears into the dustbin of history. I think he's an object lesson to us. We'll see that here in just a minute. The firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab, father of the Moabites. The younger bore a son and called his name Ben-Ami. He is the father of the Ammonites to this day. Now, I want you to think about this. You got the notes here. You can look at these. Lot is called righteous in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 7. And he says, if he rescued righteous Lot, greatly distressed by the sensual conduct of the wicked. And I think that's kind of an interesting way of positing Lot in this whole thing. But it says that he was righteous, and it could be simply that the behavior at that particular point in time was righteous. He saw the wickedness of these men. Now, this does not say that he saw the wickedness of this man all the time. It distressed him. If it distressed him, he would have left. I believe what it's saying here is that he rescued Lot from that particular point in time, that night in Sodom. He was greatly distressed by the sensual conduct of the wicked men at that time, at that night. And he was righteous in that case. He said, you're doing wicked things. Was he righteous in offering up his daughters? Absolutely not. That is a repellent, abhorrent thing to do. But the righteousness part of him is the fact that he was distressed, that he saw what was going on and he knew that it was wickedness, and he called them out for their wickedness. And he understood why God was going to destroy the city for its wickedness. So one of the lessons I want to just think about, and you can think about it. And by the way, if you got any questions, if you want to, you can send me an email. And if you send me that email this next Monday, I will be in class next Monday. When you send me that email, I will bring up those questions and we will discuss them at the very first of class. And we won't get into the next section until we talk about your questions. So if you want to keep them until then, that's fine. If you want to send them to me, it gives me a little bit of an opportunity to maybe do a little bit of research or you formulate some sort of response, okay? So the question is, what is the lesson about proximity to sin? Think about what Lot did. Lot had great herds, great fortune, servants, all of this stuff, and he lived a simple nomadic lifestyle, much like his uncle Abraham. Would have been perfectly fine. They would have been able to intermarry. Abram's kids and people that were born into his household. It would have been so simple for that to happen. And Lot saw the idea, remember, right? The lust of the eyes and the lust of the flesh and the pride of life. Every one of those bear out in Lot's life, don't they? All right. He saw the cities. He saw they were pretty, right? They had statues and they had temples and they had hanging gardens. They had all of these great things. So they were beautiful to look at. What did they also do? They, the lust of the eyes, you saw them. The lust of the flesh, what did it do? You could make yourself wealthy there, right? He sold his stuff. He became very wealthy. He was we don't know, but he could have been a tradesman. He could have been some sort of a merchant. And the idea of pride, he sat in the gates of the city. So Lot was tempted in all three ways, and in every single way, he fell flat on his face. And when he saw the wickedness of the town, and he knew that was going to be the case, he had every opportunity to move back out and to go back home. Abraham would have welcomed him, and he would have. It would have been like no time had passed, but he didn't, and he paid a hefty price for it, and it's a sad thing. So when you think about that and the idea of proximity to sin, be careful how close we get to it, because it can absolutely tear us apart. Let me pour myself a little pour myself a little drink. Because if I don't, I won't be able to finish the glass. Okay, let's look at this. So, you can imagine what happens. Abraham stands where he is because it was only a 2-day journey away. And you're talking about a plain. So what does he do? He looks in the distance and he sees smoke. What does he think? Well, no, you know exactly what he thinks. God said he's going to destroy the cities, but he would save it if there were 10 righteous souls. But he sees smoke of destruction, so what does he believe? He understands there were not 10 righteous souls in Sodom for the town to be saved. And he possibly believes that his nephew and his nephew's family are dead. So it's likely that Abraham went into mourning for Lot, believing that his nephew and his nephew's family had perished in the destruction. And to a certain extent, they did, didn't they? Lot did. Lot had nothing. He had 2 sons by incest, which grew into great nations. But it was a shame in which there was shame in how it happened. He was not able to rejoice in that. I wonder because he has two pregnant daughters. He knows that there's no men around. You wonder what his last years on earth were like, knowing what he had and what he gave up in order to be where he was. I don't know. Okay, so let's continue on. This is a slide of what's going on here. All right, let me get into the next chapter. I hope everybody's feeling well. We've had 2 cases of RSV at Piedmont Road. One was a little girl, and she was in the hospital for a while. She's back home now. She's recuperating. One is an older fella, but we've had a lot of sickness go through, and I know a lot of people have been having the flu, and it's just been kind of making its rounds. I think I actually had RSV. I didn't go to the doctor, of course. I'm a guy, so I don't go to the doctor. I just, I'll die in my chair, being either resigned or indignant until the end. But I've stayed away from people, and that's why I've been just trying to get through all of this. Oh, hold on. All right, here we go. All right, and we'll look at this. This is the Negev. All right, right here. This is the lower part of what would be the modern, or not the modern, but ancient Israel. Okay, biblical Israel is right down in here. All right, this is the Negev. Okay, I know. Excuse me. I know I'd said I was going to have a map, and that was the night that I couldn't get the slides to work. It's actually on those, but I'm going to be posting these, so you'll be able to see those a little bit later on. So from there, Abraham, where he was, journeyed toward the territory of the Negev and lived between Kadesh and Shur. Okay, here's Kadesh. All right, so right around in here. All right, and he sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said of his wife Sarai, "She is my sister." And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. Sounds familiar, right? He's tried this in the past with the Pharaoh of Egypt. And I think this tells us a little bit of something. Abraham's faith is still kind of shaky. All right, it's not firm just yet. Now we're going to see where his faith is. I think as he sees God prepare a way for him, and as he sees God do the things that he says he's going to do, how much of an understanding the people of that time had of God, I don't know. They didn't have scripture. They merely had someone telling them, and then doing what? Demonstrating what the voice said it was going to do. Adam and Eve walked and talked with God in the cool of the garden. Abraham hears a voice. All right, he says to him, he sees him in flesh, but that he didn't see the majesty of God. No man can look at the majesty of God. He saw God clothed in flesh. He was a pre-incarnate Christ, but he looked like a human being. So here you have basically what looks like a human being you telling you these things, and you're thinking, well, what real understanding did they have of God at this time? It's an interesting topic. It's one that's way too weighty to get into in the context of what we're trying to get through. But essentially, that's all he's got. So he's seeing God do things, and he's and when he says that he's going to do something, he believes that he's going to do these things. But that still allows for a little bit of, a lack of, maybe a tiny amount of doubt, right? Well, think about the 12 men that walked around with Jesus. They saw him do the things that he did. They were eyewitnesses to the incredible acts and the signs and the miracles that Jesus performed, and the words that would have only made sense coming from the Son of God. Did they still have doubts? Yeah. Was their faith still lacking? Yes. Absolutely, it was still lacking. So I try not to throw rocks at Abraham at this particular juncture. He's doing I think he's doing right now. He's working towards his faith, and I think that's good. It's not good to be stagnant in your faith. And Abraham's not stagnant in his faith. It's coming along and it's working, and it's being perfected by what God is doing for him, and that's the kind of the important thing. All right. So he still promotes this lie, and I think he probably comforts himself by saying, "Well, it's technically the truth. It's say that you're my sister because technically you're my sister." Yeah, but technically a lie is still a lie. All right. What difference would it have made if he'd gone in and said, this is my wife, and what would these men have done? Try to take her away? What do you think God's going to do? That child of promise is going to come through Sarah and Abraham. And if they tried to take Sarah and make her one of their wives and do something to Abraham, what do you think God is going to do? And I guess that's the point. Does Abraham believe that God won't protect him in the way that he needs to be protected? Does he still think that God is going to give him up, so to speak? All right. So Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. And that's literally, he went and he did not steal her. He went and probably, most likely, asked Abraham, who is this? Well, this is my sister. Remember, Sarah at this point is 90 years old. And this king is still wanting her to be his wife. So apparently Sarah has still got her looks at 90. Good for her. You go. Great. So let's get on with it. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night, and he said, "You are a dead man because of the woman you have taken, for she is a man's wife." Abimelech had not approached her. In other words, he had not approached her in the manner of a husband towards a wife in a sexual way. So he said, "Lord, will you kill an innocent people? Did he not himself say to me, she is my sister?" So he gives us an insight into what occurred between Abimelech and Abraham. He says, "She's my sister." And he said, she herself said, "He is my brother." So we see where Abraham and Sarah are in cahoots about this, right? As they were before. Wherever we go, say, "You're my sister." That way they'll deal kindly with me. I'm not sure why he's not concerned about what they would do with her. This is your wife. Why wouldn't you fight for her? But let's work with what we got, right? So did he not himself say to me, "She is my sister"? And he herself said, "He is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands, I have done this." I think this speaks well to Abimelech. This tells me that Abimelech is a man of honor. If he had known that, he wouldn't have touched her. He wouldn't have killed Abraham to get Sarah. He said, "I did it, and I had absolutely no idea. And are you going to kill me for something that I did innocently?" And like in verse 6, this shows the character of God. God said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know that you have done this in the integrity of your heart. And it was I who kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her." And I want you to go back to, "Behold, you are a dead man." I think oftentimes we leap at that and we say, God is an unreasonable God. No, we are all dead men. We are all dead men. aren't we? Unless we have God acting on our behalf, unless we have God staving off punishment, we are all dead men. So the sin that I commit today, no matter what it is, the sin that I commit today makes me a dead man. But God says, I know that you committed a sin. You did it innocently, but you committed a sin. You took this woman, all right? But I kept you from sinning against her, and I kept you from sinning against me. You took her, you weren't supposed to. You didn't know. I kept you from sinning against me. So I didn't let you touch her. Now then, return the man's wife. I like this, and let me go ahead and get this. Look at verse 7. I know. Now then, return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, so that he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not return her, know that you shall surely die, you and all who are yours. So in verse 7, Abraham is called a prophet, but he is not a priest or a king. So while he is a great man, he is a towering figure amongst the people of God. One of the main figures in the hall of faith, so to speak. He is simply a man, but he is a prophet. All right, so he speaks on behalf of God, and he can call down blessings and he can call down curses on behalf of God. Is God pleased with Abraham's conduct? I don't think so. I don't see where God praises Abraham for doing what he's done. I think what God's doing is he's perfecting Abraham, and he's putting up with Abraham's shenanigans, even though he's displeased with him. But he's perfecting him as he's perfecting me. He's perfecting you if you're a Christian. Is he pleased with me all the time? No. Does he continue to bless me? Yeah, probably way more than I deserve. And you know what? I'll take that. If I got the true wrath of God every time I messed up, who among us would be able to stand upright? Okay, so we need to keep that in mind. All right. So Abimelech gives Sarah back, and look at what he does. He says, "What is this you have done?" Verse 9. What have you done to us? And how have I sinned against you that you have brought on me and my kingdom a great sin? You have done to me things that ought not be done. I would love for you to go and take a look and look at the ancient Near East culture and the way that people responded to one another. They corresponded with one another. The book of Job is a very good one with how Lot and his friends, not only what they say, but how they say things to one another. It was absolutely acceptable to accuse someone of doing something, incredibly wrong towards you, if you said it in the right way. And it's very interesting. We look at this and we think, how would this have happened if this had happened today? Oh, it would not be nearly this polite. It would have been a show. But this is he's really castigating Abraham for doing this. He said, we could have all died. You don't understand what you've done. Your God spoke to me. He said, if I had touched your wife, I would have died, and my household. Look at what you've done to me. And Abimelech said, what did you see that you did this thing? Abraham said, I did it because I thought there's no fear of God at all in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, I like how he still hangs his hat on this, right? But she is indeed my sister, the daughter of my father, though not the daughter of my mother. So that tells me that Abraham came from one woman and Sarah came from another woman, and she became my wife. And when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, this is the kindness this you must do for me in every place that we come. Say of me, he is my brother. So now remember what God said. I'm going to bless those that bless you and curse those that curse you. He almost cursed, or he did curse Abimelech to a certain extent, cursed his household with not being able to have children. But now he's going to bless him because, God has blessed Abraham. He's going to bless Abimelech because Abimelech blesses Abraham. Abimelech takes sheep and oxen and male servants and female servants and gave them to Abraham and returned Sarah his wife to him. Everywhere that Abraham goes, he gets more and more powerful, more and more wealthy. And again, like I said a week ago, he is traveling like a small country. He is armed to the teeth. He's got male and female servants. He's got multiple goods and flocks and herds and all of these things. So he says, behold, my land is before you, dwell where it pleases you. So Abimelech knows this God of Abraham, he protects Abraham. So it's in my best interest, even though I may not worship this God, I acknowledge him. And this was the case in many of those places. Did the Pharaoh of Egypt suddenly start worshiping the God of Abraham? No. He acknowledges Abraham's God as a God, and he is the God of Abraham, but he's not my God. I'm not going to worship him, but he's yours, and he seems very powerful, so I'm not going to do anything to you. Abimelech's much in the same way. This is Abraham's God. He seems to be a pretty powerful God. I don't want to tick this guy off, because I don't know what he's going to do. Either he's going to smite me, or Abraham himself is going to come in and do these things. Abraham seems like a little bit of a, I don't know. In our words, we might call him a little bit of a punk. Why didn't he say what he needed to say when he should have said it? But it doesn't change the fact that Abimelech realizes that God is God. All right. So he said, behold, my land is before you, dwell where it pleases you. So he opens up his country to him. All right. Now, Abimelech is a king of a fairly decent sized place. Says to Sarah, he says, behold, I've given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. It is a sign of your innocence in the eyes of all who are with you, and before everyone you are vindicated. In other words, this is a sign that nothing happened between the two of them. There was no sexual contact between the two of them. So Abraham prayed to God. God healed Abimelech. Remember, God blesses, God curses. And God healed Abimelech and also healed his wife and female slaves so that they bore children. This leads me to believe that God not only caused a physical thing with the women of Abimelech's household and their inability to have children, his wife and female slaves. The way I look at this is his wife and the slaves that would have been his wives as well. Because look what he says, God healed Abimelech. So it's likely that God caused something in the flesh, something in the genitals maybe, that did not allow Abimelech to go into his wife, go into his female servants, so that they could have children. And that, I think that explains it a lot more than probably anything else would. The Lord had closed all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah. And when it says closed all the wombs, essentially that nobody was able to get pregnant, nobody was having children. It doesn't mean that they literally closed up. It means that there were no pregnancies occurring. There were the possibility of pregnancies occurring because of what was happening with him himself. Okay? Let's see. I went ahead with the next thing. I want to check again, make sure that I'm still recording. I'm hoping that this thing didn't turn off 10 minutes ago and you haven't gotten any of this. Okay. No, you're still recording. We are 58 minutes into it, and we've got another hour to go. If you want to, this is a good place to turn it off if you want to, and go get your snack. If you're like me, you've probably turned it off and on 10 times and gone and done what you needed to do as you go through this. I know this is no substitute for being in class, and I apologize. It could not be helped this week. Okay. All right. So we are in chapter 21. So this is the big event, right? God says, I'm going to bless you. You're going to have a son. It's going to come through your loins, Abraham, and it's going to be through your wife, Sarah, not the slave woman. That is your son, and I recognize him as your son. I'm going to make of him a great nation, but the child of promise, the one through which the nations of the earth are going to be blessed, through which the land is going to be inherited, through which you're going to have descendants without number. It's going to come through the child that comes through the two of you. All right. So in chapter 21, verse 1, the Lord visited Sarah as he had said. He does what he promised, what he's going to do. Remember, God always, always, always fulfills his promises. If there had been 10 people in Sodom that were righteous, would God have spared the city? 1,000%. 1,000%. And I imagine that's what Abraham was hoping for, that Lot and his family would make up that 10, and they didn't. But God would have done it. He would have done it. Had the people, well, let's just get into this. I could get off on a tangent. So he allows her to become pregnant with Isaac. Sarah conceives and bears Abraham a son in his old age. All right. And he is old at this point, at the time of which God has spoken to him. So this is a little over a year, or let's see, close to a year after the men had come to visit him. Abraham calls the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore him, Isaac. Isaac is the idea of laughter. And I don't know if it's, Isaac means he laughs. I thought it made he makes to laugh, but Isaac means he laughs. This was common in those days. You had names that were specific, and then you had names that were people were known by. So he calls him Isaac. And I imagine it was probably a little bit of an inside joke. Every time Sarah saw him, she was reminded that both Abraham and her laughed when they were told what was going to happen. Okay, just kind of like a little ironic joke on at their expense. I imagine they were pretty fine with it, though. Having waited that long, it's okay. Abraham circumcises his son at 8 days old in accordance with the covenant. Remember, he circumcised all of his male servants and his son Ishmael. So they are all part of the covenant. So Isaac, no exception. He's circumcised at 8 days old. And I think I said this last time, the way they did that was with flint knives. And I want you to think about that. With flint knives, they circumcised these kids with no Novocaine or pain relief. This was no laughing matter. Let me tell you. So Isaac is the second son, but he is freeborn. Ishmael is firstborn, but of a slave woman. And the two are not on legal parity with one another. Parity, as I say down here. He's not on legal parity with Isaac. So the legal option at this time was for the son of a slave, they could forego an inheritance in exchange for freedom. Now, Ishmael has already promised an inheritance from God, and I believe that this is what Sarah has in mind. What she wants to do is ensure that Ishmael takes that freedom in exchange for giving up the inheritance. And we'll see it goes a little bit further down. The child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, to whom she had borne to Abraham, laughing. Some translations say mocking. That may be more of the case. So she says to Abraham, now what that means, that has a lot of implications about Ishmael mocking. Now Ishmael's an older child at this point, and it could very well be a fear on Sarah's part that Ishmael may choose to do harm to this child. And it's an understandable fear. I can imagine, he is constantly reminded that while he is Abraham's son, he is not freeborn. He is the son of a slave woman. And all he hears is this, since Sarah gets pregnant, all he hears is the expectations for this new entry into the camp of Abraham. And it could be that he was mocking the child in just kind of a mean-spirited way that oftentimes children that age do. But it could have been something more. But it was enough that Sarah, when she saw it, began to get concerned. And she said to Abraham, "Cast out the slave woman with her son, for the son of the slave woman will not be heir with my son Isaac." And I like what Abraham has a take on it that I can certainly appreciate. The thing was very displeasing to Abraham on account of his son. He still loves Ishmael. He knows that this Isaac is the one that was promised, and Isaac is likely going to be the favored son, and this was inevitably going to cause problems between the two boys and between Hagar and Sarah. And remember, Hagar is still Sarah's slave woman. And in spite of all that, Abraham is still cognizant of the fact that Ishmael is his son. It is his firstborn son. And they had spent time together. It's not like Ishmael was cast out on the other side of the camp. He saw him because his mother was right there with Sarah. So he's displeasing to him. And he's probably very disappointed. I imagine part of it was disappointment in Sarah that she could not maintain politeness isn't even the right word. Give Hagar dignity, I think, is probably even a better way. Here you have this young woman whose body was used against her will to provide a child for her mistress, who then despised her for it and tried to kill or basically drove her away. She goes back. We don't know what the relationship was between them after that. I don't think it got any better, especially when the child was born. So I think this goes into the idea of what are the disadvantages of polygamy, number one. How does that relate in relation to going in contradiction to God's word or law or desire, number two. So you have practical aspects and you have just plain spiritual aspects of it. So verse 12 gives God's, again, at the end of the day, it all comes down to what does God say about it, all right? God says to Abraham, do not be displeased because of the boy and because of your slave woman. The idea of displeased means disheartened. Don't give up on this. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you, for through Isaac shall your offspring be named. That's the woman and that's the child that it was supposed to happen through in the first place. You got ahead of it, okay? You jumped the gun, but don't be disheartened. Look at what he says. I will make a nation of the son of the slave woman also, because he is your offspring. Again, what is God going to do? God's going to bless Abraham, and in flowing down from that, Ishmael is going to be blessed. God loves Abraham. Abraham loves Ishmael. So God's going to bless Ishmael. All right. Now, we might look at this next point of action as being a little desperate, right? Maybe a little bit of a stretch. He says, Abraham rose early in the morning, likely before Sarah and Isaac woke up, takes a bread and a skin of water and gives it to Hagar, sends them away with the bare essentials, bread and water. I think, now here's the thing. I think that maybe this is a test of Abraham's faith in the command of God to listen to Sarah. He said, I'm going to bless Ishmael, and don't be disheartened. I'm going to make of him a great nation. What does that mean? Does God fulfill his promises? Yes. So does that mean that God is going to allow Ishmael to die? No. Now, is Abraham kind of testing God here? Yeah, okay, God, that's fine. You say you're going to take care of him, that's fine. All I'm going to give him is some bread and water. So he gives him some bread and water, and he gives it to Hagar, puts it on his shoulder. I wonder if there had to have been an enormous amount of guilt on part of Abraham to give this stuff to her, to see her eyes when she puts this satchel of bread and this skin of water. And I wonder if Hagar, as she mounts up on this, I don't even know if they have an animal. It appears that they just walked away. Didn't even give her an animal to ride. But maybe this is it. It's like she doesn't need anything because God's going to give them everything they need. I don't know. I'm going to look at it that way rather than Abraham just being a stingy old man. I think that's probably the best course of action. Abraham's not just being stingy. He's not being parsimonious. He's giving them just what they need because God's going to give them everything else, right? Gives this day our daily bread. He gave them their daily bread and he sent them on their way. So she departs and she wanders in the wilderness of Beersheba. Let me see if I can. Let's see, Beersheba. Okay, so we got Beersheba right here. So they are right in this little realm right here. By the way, this was the plain where Sodom and Gomorrah is right at the tail end of the Dead Sea. Okay. All right. So you got Kadesh Barnea right down here. So she heads towards the wilderness of Beersheba. And when the water in the skin was gone, she puts the child underneath one of the bushes. Now, God told Abraham what he was going to do, and he had told Hagar what he was going to do, but he didn't tell how he was going to do it. She puts the child underneath one of the bushes. He goes down, sits. It says a good way off. Now, I've shot a bow a long time ago, but I can't for the life of me remember how far the arrow went. I mean, I just let it fly, and it just went, but I cannot remember how far that is. It could be as much as 100 yards away. I just don't know. But it says she went off a long way. So let me not look upon the death of the child. And she sat opposite him. She lifted up her voice and wept. All right. Perfectly understandable for a young mother. God heard the voice of the boy. And the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What troubles you? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is." There's a lesson in that. There's a lesson in that. When we cry, God hears us where we are. If you're ever interested in putting a little devotional thought together, this is a perfect one. All right. So God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Up, lift up the boy and hold him fast with your hand, for I will make him into a great nation. And he certainly does. We read about Ishmael becoming father of 12 princes, and those would eventually become the Arab folks that would give rise to the Muslims. So you saw, with just that act of polygamy, with competing women and competing children, you have two of these people that are, become basically almost mortal enemies. Now, not to say that the Muslims are not enemies with just about everybody else, but they certainly are with the Jews, because they're competing with one another. They're still competing with one another for the favor of God. Isn't that weird? They're still competing with one, where they both consider themselves, well, we'll get to it here in just a couple of moments. So Ishmael becomes the beginning of the Arab nations. They claim a relationship with Yahweh or Allah through Abraham. All right. So he lives in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. I'm going to flip back again, okay? I'm trying to remember. I don't know if Paran is, I don't think it's on here. No, it's not listed on here. There's so many names. I've tried to find a map with all the names, but they had to make it so small, or they had to make it with all the names. You couldn't tell where anything was, and the detail was terrible. So I encourage you to pull one up and just see where these places are. It always makes it very more interesting when you say they travel from here to there. Oh, I know where it is. Okay. All right, let's continue on. At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, said to Abraham, "God is with you in all that you do." They've kind of understood this now. "Now, therefore, swear to me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me or with my descendants or with my posterity. But as I have dealt kindly with you, so you will deal with me and with the land where you have sojourned." And Abraham said, "I will swear." I think what's going on here, Abimelech knows that God is behind everything that Abraham does. Everything that Abraham possesses, he got first from his father, and then as God made him wealthy through Abimelech and Pharaoh, and everywhere he's been, he's gotten the better of every single trade. He's gotten the better of everything that he's ever done, and he's become just this fabulously, he may be more wealthy than Abimelech himself. It's interesting that when that Pharaoh arose that didn't know Joseph, that tried to that made slaves of the Hebrews, it was because the people of the Hebrew people had become more numerous and become more prosperous than even the Egyptians had. They didn't give up their lands. They didn't give up their flocks to Pharaoh. They were taken care of. There was nothing that they lacked. So I think what happens here is that Abimelech wants to get ahead of things, and he wants to smooth the waters, make sure that everything's smooth sailing between him and Abraham. He does not want to be in conflict with him. It's entirely probable that Abraham's fighting force might have been bigger than Phichol's. I don't know. So when Abraham reproved Abimelech about a well of water that Abimelech's servants had seized, Abimelech said, I do not know who has done this thing. You did not tell me, and I've not heard about it until today. So the two men made a covenant. Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock apart. He says, these 7 ewe lambs that you will take from my hand, that this may be a witness for me that I dug this well. So they established this well in Beersheba. And this is well known, the well in Beersheba. All right. Then Abimelech and Phichol rose, returned to the land of the Philistines. So we know about where they are. The land of the Philistines, if you look back at that land, well, we're going to look back at the map again. I like having that. The land of the Philistines was in this area right here. It was a coastal land. So it was right here on this coast, down about right here. Okay, that's the land of the Philistines. They had 5 city-states, and all 5 of those city-states are listed. I'm not off the top of my head. Ashdod and Gad and a couple of, I don't remember all of them, but that's where they go back to. And Abraham sojourned many days in the lands of the Philistines. If you noticed on that map, that was one of the areas that was considered to be very fertile. So this is a good place for lots of flocks to be watered. There's pasture land, and it was a good place for Abraham to sojourn for a little while and wait until God gave him further marching orders, and then he'd go and do something else for him. So, okay. All right. Let's see here. Let's move on. Chapter 22. All right. Now, what I want to do, I mentioned this last week, and I had somebody ask me, and I hope they're watching now. You asked me about the idea of type and antitype, and some people might know that. You probably have heard the word antitype in 1 Peter chapter 3, where it says, and now, behold, baptism now corresponds to this. The idea of there being the idea of corresponding. This is the idea of a type and antitype. So I want to do just a brief talk about what those things are, so there's no confusion. Because it very much affects what we talk about in Genesis chapter 22. Type versus antitype. We need to remember this. A type is always found in the Old Testament. The antitype is a fulfillment or a completion that we find in the New Testament. And you think, okay, but what does that mean? Because most people would think a type would be the superior and the antitype, because of that idea of the anti, meaning the opposite of or against. That's not the way that it is. So you have a type and then you have an antitype. The antitype is the superior. It's the completion. It's the perfection of something that we find in the Old. So here's some examples, right? The 2 Adams. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 22. For as in Adam, the first created man, all die. So also, that's what makes it the antitype. So also in Christ, the antitype. So Adam is the type, Christ is the antitype. Now we look at the idea of 2 Adams. You don't have to say 2 Adams. A-D-A-M-S, by the way, not atoms, Adams. We talk about Adam being a type of Christ. Christ is a type of Adam. But the point is that one is the type, Adam, the first created man. Christ is the antitype. For as in Adam, all die. That's the inferior, the incomplete. So in Christ, the antitype, shall all be made alive. All right? So that's an example of type versus antitype. All right? The bronze serpent in the wilderness and the cross. All right? John 3, verse 14 and 15. And as Moses lifted up the serpent, the bronze serpent in the wilderness, the type, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. How was he lifted up? On the cross. The type, or I'm sorry, the antitype. Bronze serpent, the type. Cross, the antitype. Type, inferior. Antitype, superior, or perfected version of. Okay? So must the Son of Man be lifted up on the cross, that whoever believes in him may have eternal life. In this case, it's kind of similar, right? Only way that you could survive that infestation of serpents that came into the camp, that God sent there, by the way, was to go and look upon that bronze serpent. They were biting everybody, and if you got bit, you died. It didn't mean you died immediately, but you had a limited period of time that you could live. He says, this is what I want you to do. I'm scourging you, right? I'm chastising you. I'm afflicting you, right? I'm disciplining you. This is what you're going to do. You're going to go and you're going to hammer out a bronze serpent. And we think, that just sounds so weird for God for us to make this image to be lifted up. And they weren't worshiping the bronze serpent. They were looking at the bronze serpent. And that looking on it saved their lives. So in this case, looking on the bronze serpent saved their lives. And the idea of focusing ourselves on the Son of Man on the cross. When we focus ourselves on him, that's how we're made alive, through eternal life. All right. Like I said, it was a brief, so I'm hoping that you follow with me as we go a little bit further on. So let's look at this. Chapter 22, after these things, God tested Abraham. A lot of people have a problem with the idea of being tested by God. It says that God does not sin, nor does he cause or tempt others to sin. God's not here tempting Abraham to sin. And the idea of testing is not the sense of, will he do it or he won't do it. I think this is as much of a statement to Abraham as it is to himself. It's proving something, all right? The idea of testing is proving something. So he says to him, Abram, and he says, I am here. He says, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. Okay, so just a little bit. I think this is where Abraham's faith begins to come into his own. God acknowledges his faith. He calls him by name. Remember, we got to remember this, and this is important for us to remember and to teach others, that faith is not just an attitude toward God. It is a surrender to him. And in this, Abraham's surrender to God is doing what he believes to be the most illogical thing. This is a son of promise. Okay, the son of promise. This is the son through which the nation is going to be blessed. The nations of the earth are going to be blessed. And the land is going to be inherited. God has a plan for Isaac. So nothing's going to happen to him. This is the logical progression. So the illogical thing would be, if this is the son through which everything is going to come, why would I kill him? Or if I kill him, why would God allow him to remain dead? I think this is the key. I think this is where we see Abraham's faith. This is the linchpin. This is the turning point in Abraham's faith. Everything else has been leading up to this, because after this, well, we'll see. We'll read it, okay? So it is Abraham's surrender to God. It's our surrender to God. It wasn't faith until it was put into action. Now, he showed faith in doing the things that God told him to do. But if he had faith that God was going to bless him in certain ways, it wasn't going to be faith until he put it into action. All right. What was his faith? That God wouldn't give him a son and a promise until he kept both of them. So basically, after verse 1, God is saying to Abraham, remember I said that your descendants would be as numerous as the stars and that they would come from Isaac? And Abraham says, yeah, I remember that. And God says, good, now go kill Isaac. Now this is a test. That's about as strong a test of faith as that I think you could possibly imagine. So now Abraham has never heard of a resurrection. All right. No one had heard it. It never happened before. It wouldn't even have been something that would have come into his mind. When someone died, they stayed dead. He'd never seen it otherwise. When you killed an animal, it stayed dead. When you killed a human being, they stayed dead. Abraham had never heard of a resurrection, didn't even know there was such a thing. But he figures the only way that God can keep that promise to him is that if he kills Isaac, and he would do that because God told him to, that God is going to find a way for Isaac to continue doing and being that child of promise. All right. I want you to I don't know if we understand how massive that is. I don't know if any of our faiths has been tested in that way ever. I don't know. And I'm not calling your faith into question saying, well, we can't have good faith until something that massive happens to us. I hope I hope I never have my faith tested in that way because of the magnitude of it. I do like to think, however, that I would pass that proving. I like to think so. I pray that I would. So Abraham goes about it, right? He says, so Abraham rose. I like this. He tells him to do this thing. So early in the morning, he rises up, he saddles his donkey, takes 2 of his young men with him and his son Isaac. So they head out on this journey. He cut the wood for the burnt offering, and he rose and he went to the place of which God had told him on the 3rd day. You know, we talked about the idea of type and antitype. This is part of that idea of the type and the antitype, 3 days. Abraham lifts up his eyes and he sees the place from afar. Abraham says to his young men, stay here with the donkey. Look at this. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. So Abraham goes about this thing that God tells him to do, believing that very thing, that God, if I have to kill him, and he sees no chance that that won't happen. He knows he's going to have to kill his son. He just thinks God's going to raise him back up, or God's going to cause that son to either not have to suffer death, or there's going to be some major thing. He knows God's powerful enough. He just doesn't know what exactly he's going to do, but that's where faith comes in, right? Okay. So he goes about it believing that very thing. He says, we will worship, and literally, we will return to you. So Abraham's faith here is on full display. Yes, sir. What do you want me to do, Lord? Go kill Isaac. All right, here I go. He goes it, and he says, so tells the servant, just hold tight. We'll be back down. We're going to go up and worship, then we'll be back down. I mean, it boggles the mind how much faith is required to do something like this. All right. So let's look at this. Isaac is a type of Christ. Let's see. What are some similarities to the crucifixion story? Number one, it's a sacrifice of a child of promise. And both were miraculous births. We said, what's more miraculous? A child to be born of a virgin, or a child to be born of a 90-year-old woman? It's never happened before. There's been 90-year-old men that have been fathers. I think there's been a 90-year-old man. I know of a 70-year-old, and I know a 75-year-old, but not a woman because of their genetic makeup. They have a limited window of being able to conceive children because of how women's reproductive organs are formed and the purpose that they serve. And for a 90-year-old woman to have a child is as miraculous as a virgin to have a child. It's just on opposite spectrums, right? Opposite ends of the spectrum. Excuse me. All right. We know this. Abraham takes the wood of the burnt offering, lays it on Isaac, his son. So the sacrifice carried the wood. Isaac carries the wood up the mountain for the sacrifice. What did Christ do? He carried his own cross to the place of skulls. By the way, Mount of Moriah is the location of Golgotha. There's confusion as to where, but it is so close as to be irrelevant as to whether it's 5 miles away, 2 miles away, 3 miles away. Dead center on where the Golgotha is. The mountains of Moriah are there. So the place he is, wherever Abraham attempts to offer Isaac is within. I'll say, I'm being facetious here, but it's within throwing distance of the Temple Mount. This is how close they are to where Jesus was crucified. He is a type of Christ in that he is an innocent victim. We see here, it's very strange. I'll kind of break this for just a second. Isaac's narrative is very interesting because it is very, very short. There's not a whole lot of space written in Isaac as a person. Lot and Abraham getting to Isaac, very short, limited amount of Isaac. He gets married to Rebekah. They have children. And then we see him getting a little older when the 2 boys come in, when Jacob and Esau come in to deceive him, or when Jacob comes in to deceive him. And then it really, the narrative becomes Jacob's. So it's kind of interesting. But we don't read much about Isaac as a child or as an adult. That's just all there is to it. But we see here that it was an innocent victim. He was a young man in this. He was not a child. He was not a 5-year-old, 6-year-old child. He was probably 16, 17 years old, roundabout. But he had done nothing deserving of being crucified or laid upon an altar. Okay, so an innocent victim. You have the father who sacrifices his own son. Remember, Jesus even said, do you not think I could call my father and he would send me 12 legions of angels? God withdrew his protection from Jesus so that Jesus could be crucified. In this case, of course, Abraham actually physically was to offer up his son. But in both cases, this is the father being the deciding factor in the crucifixion and then the sacrifice. Isaac trusted and obeyed his father. Look what he says in verse 7. And Isaac said to his father Abraham, my father. And he said, here I am, my son. He said, behold, the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for burnt offering? Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So they went, both of them together. All right. He trusted his father. Jesus trusted his father. If Isaac knew that he was to be sacrificed, I think here, we're not given to know that Abraham told him what he was going to do. It is entirely possible that Abraham said, look, this is what God told me to do, but don't worry, God's taking care of this. This is the God that and he probably told him all of the great things that God has done, and told him, look, don't worry. It's only going to hurt for a second. It's all going to be okay. But Isaac trusted and obeyed his father, and Jesus obeyed his father unto death. So, what's the significant difference? That's how the type leads to the antitype. What's the difference? The biggest one, of course, is the most significant one. The only one that really means anything is that Isaac's death was not required. It was Abraham's faith and willingness to do that is what pleased God and satisfied God. God provided another way, but we know that, of course, Christ's death on the cross was absolutely necessary. There must be a blood sacrifice. There must be a shedding of blood, and it was Christ's blood on the cross. That's the only thing that gets rid of sin guilt, and that's what we had to get rid of in our sinful selves. And I believe, as we said, this is where Abraham's faith in God really finally comes into its own. That's when it's satisfied, I think. I want to look at this in verse 8. Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering. Of course, that could be another thing. The idea that Isaac as a lamb and Jesus being the lamb as well. There's several. I thought those were the most significant ones. Look at what it says, Lord will provide. And of course, in the Greek, pro is toward, and video means to see. So it says that God will see to it. God sees in advance, and he sees what we need, and he's going to make sure of it. He's going to see to what was necessary. And God did provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, didn't he? I like that God acknowledges him. Look at verse 11. He binds his son. He lays him on the altar. He's getting ready to slaughter his son. Look at verse 11. The angel of the Lord called him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here am I. God acknowledges his faith, and he calls him by name. He says, do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, seeing that you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. So Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, God provided a sacrifice, right? He provided Isaac. He provided Isaac as the sacrifice, but did not require Isaac as the sacrifice. He provided his own sacrifice, which was a ram that was caught in the thicket. A ram starts out as a lamb, right? Okay. Abraham takes him, offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. And so Abraham called the name of that place, the Lord will provide, provide. Right? God is looking forward to it. He is seeing forward. He sees in advance, sees what's necessary, and God will provide. And I like that because I think that applies to us, right? God will provide. We say that all the time. I hope we mean it. We need to make sure that we make people aware. Then we say, well, the Lord will provide, that we genuinely mean it. The Lord is already looking forward. He's looking forward in my life already to when I leave this office and I head back home. I hope he's looking for providing me a safety. My wife and my daughter are out tonight. I hope he's providing them safety for where they are and back home again. All of you, wherever you may be doing after you finish watching this, we say, Lord, give us this day our daily bread. Do we mean that? Jesus said it. He said, this is the way we should pray. We ask him for every day for the things that we need. That's the idea here. The Lord will provide. And do we have the faith that Abraham said when he said that? Anyway, that's something that's just sort of a little thing I wanted to throw out there. All right. All right, let's go a little bit further. Let's go to chapter 23. We're almost done, folks. I don't have that much longer. I think we're going to get through here in about 2 hours. All right, so Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. All right, so she died in Hebron, and we see here's Hebron right here. And Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. This was the idea of went in. Basically, they retired to their tents. You didn't go out and openly mourn in the way that he would have mourned. Have you ever my wife calls it ugly cry. I always thought that was a funny thing until I saw people do it, and I realized now I know why they call it ugly cry. It's not that it's ugly that we're crying, it's the faces that we make. We disfigure our faces when we cry. Sometimes I look at people and think, oh man, something's wrong. They've been in a fight. No, they've just been this just mourning and grief and anguish. And this is it. They retreat to their tents. Abraham goes into his tent, and when he is finished throwing himself on his bedroll and crying and disfiguring his face, he can clean himself up, he can go out, and he can be presentable to the people. But right now, he's in his tent, and he's weeping. So then after he finishes this period of mourning within the tent, he rose up from before his dead, where Sarah's laid out. She's been prepared for burial. And he says to the Hittites, I am a sojourner and foreigner among you. Give me property among you for a burying place, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. This is a practical thing. He doesn't want to travel to go and find a place. His wife is deceased, and he does not, for one thing, it's impractical, and it's a little bit impolite to carry around a dead person simply to find a place that's going to be a little bit more convenient. He says, I'm going to find some place that, and by the way, he knows that eventually all of this is going to belong to his folks anyway. So anything he buys here, he's essentially, his descendants are going to come back and possess it anyway. So it says, give me this property. The Hittites said, hear us, Lord, you are Prince of God among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. None of us will withhold from you to his tomb to hinder you from burying your dead. So Abraham rose and bowed to the Hittites, the people of the land. He said to them, if you are willing that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat for me Ephron, son of Zohar, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns. It is at the end of his field. For the full price, let him give it to me in your presence as a property for a burying place. He's establishing a permanent location for himself and his descendants, so that even if he sojourns again, this will always belong to him, because once he buys that, it's his in perpetuity. Property rights even back then were sacrosanct. You didn't violate property rights. If he bought it, it was his. He could sell it to someone else, certainly so. He could will it to someone else. If he died, it passed down to his successive generations. Ephron was sitting among the Hittites, and he answered him in the hearing of the Hittites, who all went in at the gate of his city. He says, no, my Lord, hear me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. The sites of the sons of my people I give it to you. Bury your dead. He says, but, and verse 13, he says, but if you will, hear me. So this is a give and take. As I said before, the way that people spoke to one another was very, very specific, very peculiar to our ears. We're much more casual in the way we speak to one another. Back then, it was a much more formal type of thing, especially when there was either a covenant to be cut, a dispute to be settled, a sale to be tendered. Whatever it was, there was a formalness to it, and there was a give and take that was, I don't know, hard to describe, but it was unique to that culture, but it still goes on there. It still is very much a part of their culture. He says, but if you will, hear me. I give the price of the field. Accept it from me that I may bury my dead there. So it's almost like, do me the favor of taking this money from me so that I could buy this field. Look what Ephraim says. My Lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. Look how what he does there. He gives them the price of the field without saying, okay, I'll sell it to you for 400 shekels of silver. He throws it back. It's like, look, what is this between you and I? 400 shekels. What's 400 shekels between you and I? He said, but for 400 shekels, what is that between you and me? Bury your dead. It's such a unique way of talking. And if you look at the writings of the time, even during the biblical times in those days, it was that type of language. You look at that with Job and his three friends, and then the fourth one as they come in, how they spoke to one another. It's just I always found it very interesting when they did that. All right, so Abraham listens to Ephron, and he weighed out for Ephron the silver for 400 shekels of silver. So it becomes basically a family burial plot. Likely only the major characters, the major figures of the family were buried there. When it says cave, I think we're thinking like Mammoth Cave. This cave was likely not an enormous cave. You can't bury everybody there. It was, I don't know. I'm looking at the room I'm in, and it's about close to 20 by 20, right? And I look at it and I think, if you brought a bunch of people in here, you could probably, and I hate to be, crude, but you could probably stack up 30 to 40 people in here, roundabout. And if you think about it, you've got the major family members, you've got the patriarchs, and then you might have more beloved servants, people that were there for a while. Think about Eleazar of Damascus, right? That was Abraham's trusted servant, his oldest and his wisest, his most trusted servant. It's probable that Eleazar would have been buried in that tomb. But it becomes a burial plot, and we know for a fact that Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, Rebekah, and Leah are all buried there. Only Rachel is missing. She was buried near Bethlehem, where, of course, she died in childbirth, giving birth to Benjamin. It apparently now is the second most holy place to the Jews, next to the Temple Mount. I did not know that, and apparently it is still available. You can go to the cave of Machpelah. So I did not know that, but there you go. All right. Let's see. Let's go to Genesis chapter 24, and then we're going to finish this up. All right. Abraham is old, well advanced in years. The Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. Abraham's time is about over. He's been on this earth for well over 100 years, and it's about time for Abraham to go the way of all flesh. So Abraham says to his servant, the old of his household, who had charge of all that he had, this is certainly Eleazar. I said possibly. It is certainly Eleazar. This is the one that would have inherited all of his goods had Isaac not come along. Well, if it weren't for Ishmael, this is the one that he complained about. He's like, all my stuff's going to go to this servant. So he makes him, he look what he says. He says, put your hand under my thigh. I had to look this up, and there are different ways of interpreting this. I look at the one that is the most logical in regards to put your hand under my thigh. I do believe that it literally means put your hand. The servant would come forward. He would kneel before the master or the patriarch or whoever it was, and then he would put his hand underneath the thigh of the person who is swearing him to an oath. There's different reasons why this might have been done, the significance of the hand under the thigh, but what I've seen, that this is literally what was done. These are not euphemisms for anything else. So he says, put your hand under my thigh that I may make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of the earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell. Why is this so? This is certainly because Abraham has seen the wickedness of the Canaanites. He knows that the Canaanites are going to make way for his descendants. I think at this point he knows God's plan. The specifics, maybe not, but he knows that the Canaanites are going to make way for his descendants. And he does not want his progeny to get mixed up with the likes of these Canaanite women. Even Ishmael didn't take a wife from the Canaanites. He took a wife from the Egyptians. So his mom, Hagar, even knew the Canaanites their wickedness was getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, okay? So he says, you must go to my country, which was where? Well, he came out of Ur of the Chaldees. He's not making him go all the way back to Ur. He's making him go to Nahor. I'm saying it the wrong way. It says, I want you to go to my wife, or my country, and to my kindred, and take a wife for my son Isaac. Servant comes back and he says, no, listen, I'm certainly going to go and do this, but on the what if I get there and the woman that we choose, the woman that you've entrusted me to choose, won't come back with me here? Should I take your son back to the land from which you came? And look at this. He says, I don't want you to get my son from here, and I don't want you to take my son. I don't want you to get a wife for my son from here. I don't want you to take my son back here. Okay. See to it that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house, from the land of my kindred, who spoke to me and swore to me, to your offspring I will give this land, he will send his angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from there. Not just pick her from there, but take her from there. Not live there. She must leave her father's house there like I did, come to this place. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this oath of mine, only you must not take my son back there. So Abraham is certainly acknowledging God's promise to him, but he's making sure that the servant knows that there are stipulations to this oath. If you do this, she won't come back, then you're free from the oath. But do not take my son back to my homeland. So the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his master, and swore to him concerning the matter. All right. So we're not going to read all this. He takes all of this stuff, all the gifts that would certainly have been part of a dowry. He rose and went to Mesopotamia, to the land of Nahor, and he made the camels kneel, and he goes and I like this. Look, this shows me that Eleazar saw the God of Abraham, and as he was prepared to swear to that God, now he entreats the God for Abraham's God, his God. Because remember, Eleazar was circumcised as well. So he's part of that. He's a sign of that covenant. He's part of that covenant. I like that because that shows that God not only cared about his people, but he cared about the servants of his people. I don't think too many people think about that. But here it says, he says, O Lord, God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today. I think I'm going to stop again one last time. I think it's interesting. He says, O Lord, God of my master Abraham. I don't think this is the case where it's not my God. I think he's acknowledging that this is the God that granted Abraham all that he has, the one who showed his power to Abraham, and through Abraham, of course, to Eleazar. Okay, sorry. He says, please grant me success today and show steadfast love to my master Abraham. Behold, I'm standing by the spring of the water. The daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Let the young woman to whom I shall say, please let down your jar that I may drink. And who shall say, drink, and I will water your camels? Let her be the one. By this I shall know that you have shown steadfast love to my master. Talk about being specific. I mean, there's not going to be any room for vagaries here. Not, hey, show me one of these ladies. If I pick one out, show me 10. Pick one out of those. It's let this one be the one, so that I know. I think this is not Eleazar trying to be so specific that he gets out of his vow. I think this is Eleazar trying to be so specific that it would only be God that could cause it to happen. That it would have to be an act of God to show this young woman to him and to lead him to her, and for this to happen. Okay. Before he had finished speaking, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor. By the way, these are the ones that we read about, I believe, in chapter 19 or 20. It was told to Abraham that his brother Nahor had sons by Milcah. So we didn't go into that. If you want to go back and look at that, but these are the people that he was talking about at that point in time. She comes out with her water jar on her shoulder. She was attractive in appearance, a maiden whom no man had known. She was a virgin. Went down to the spring, filled her jar, and came up. The servant Eleazar runs to meet her and says, please give me a little water to drink from your jar. She says, drink. When she had finished, look at this. When she had finished giving him a drink, she says, I will draw water for your camels also until they have finished drinking. So she took the jar that she had just finished to take to the house that she was responsible for, pours it into the trough for the camels, goes to the well, ran again to the well to draw water, and she drew for all of his camels. The man gazed at her in silence to learn whether the Lord had prospered his journey or not. Now, you're thinking, okay, this is pretty specific. You asked for specificity, and the Lord gave you specificity. So he's wondering, has the Lord done this or not? So afterwards, the man takes this gold ring weighing half a shekel and 2 bracelets for her arms. Says, please tell me whose daughter you are. Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? And then she says, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. Well, Eleazar is going to know the family. So now he knows who these people are. So he knows that he's in the right place. Even if this isn't the right woman, this is the right place. Okay? Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his steadfast love and his faithfulness towards my master. As for me, the Lord has led me in the way to the house of my master's kinsman. So it's obvious that this is a thing from God. Rebecca has a brother whose name was Laban. Laban runs out to the man to the spring. He says, come on inside. Why are you standing outside? Prepare the place and the house and a place for the animals. Again, the hospitality aspect. This is the culture of the times. So you're a servant. You're servant of my kinsman. He brings him on. So he says, I am Abraham's servant. Lord has greatly blessed my master. He's become great, given him flocks and herds, silver and gold. Listed all of these things. Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master, and to him she has given all that he has. So he's making the case for Isaac. It's like, look, I'm here for a wife for my master's son, but be assured, she is not going into poverty. She is going into enormous wealth. Enormous wealth. Says, my master made me swear, gives him the details of the oath that he takes. And verse 42, he says, I came today to the spring. And it's interesting because it seems like they're just going back and they're listing every single thing that's going on. There's some who believe that this is a later addition to the book. I don't believe that it's a later addition to the book. Sometimes we repeat things either for clarity or for emphasis, okay? This could be either one of those. But essentially, he basically goes over everything. All this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and this happened, and getting to 45. Before I'd speaking in my heart, she came out with her water jar. And he basically repeats everything that we've read just earlier. In verse 50, he says, then Laban and Bethuel answered and said, the thing has come from the Lord. We can't speak to you bad or good. What is this an answer to? In verse 49, now then, if you're going to show steadfast love and faithfulness to my master, tell me, in other words, are you going to give me the woman? And that's not, I'm not trying to be crude. Are you going to allow her to go to my master's son? Are you going to allow her to be a wife to this young man of great wealth and prosperity? If not, tell me so that I know to go to another one of the kinsmen. Should I go here or should I go here? Okay, so the thing has come from the Lord. We cannot speak to you bad or good. Behold, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go. Let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken. I think, look at this case, Laban is an honorable man. Laban and Bethuel have the right to speak on behalf of the family. So when I'm using Eleazar because I definitely believe this is who this is. When he heard this, he bowed himself to the earth before the Lord. The servant brought out jewelry of silver and of gold and of garments, gave them to Rebekah. He gave to her brother and her mother costly ornaments. He gave them all of these things. This is a show of, this is an example of my master's wealth. This is a gift, so to speak, showing you what your daughter is in for. Okay, so he says to the men who are with him, and he and the men who are with him ate and drank and spent the night there. When they rose in the morning, he said, send me away to my master. In other words, he's asking for release. I can't stick around. I'm ready to get back home. My master's old. I want to show that I've accomplished this thing, because who knows? I mean, he may get back home and Abraham's died in the night. He says, I want to show Abraham that I was able to accomplish this thing. Kind of like when a kid When a small child, you give them a task and they go do it, man, first thing they do, they run back, and it doesn't matter what else is going on. They want to come back and show you, I've done what you told me to do. I need some praise. I did exactly what you told me to do. Not in just that way, but I think this is a little bit of it. Said, let her brother and her mother said, let the young woman remain with us a while, at least 10 days. After that, she may go. But he said to them, do not delay me, since my Lord has prospered my way. Send me my ways that I may go to my master. They said, let's call the young woman and ask her. So they called Rebekah and said to her, will you go with this man? And she said, I will go. All right. So this is Rebekah's acceptance of the offer of the proposal of marriage to Isaac. So they sent away Rebekah, their sister, and her nurse, and Abraham's servant, and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, "O sister, maybe you become tens. O sister, may you become thousands of 10,000s, and may your offspring possess the gate of those who hate him." All right. So this is just sort of like a final farewell blessing and pronouncement. So she and her maidservant arose. The idea of sister and Rebekah and her nurse, typically the nurse who took care of her when she was young traveled with her for the rest of her life, and that was her servant until she passed. So Rebekah and her young woman arose and rode on the camels and followed the man, and the servant took Rebekah and went his way. So Isaac is dwelling in the Negeb. He returned from Beer Lahai Roi and was dwelling in the Negeb. He goes out to meditate in the field towards the evening. The idea of meditating here could be simply the idea of just being in the presence of God. Could have been prayer involved in that. They didn't have scripture that we understand, but there were likely some writings that Abraham has written down concerning his conversations with the Lord, and he may have been reading those. We don't know. But the idea here is he was meditating. Rebekah lifts up her eyes. She sees Isaac. And the servant says, that's my master. So she takes her veil and covered herself. The idea of modesty until the wedding ceremony. So the servant tells Isaac all the things he had done. Isaac brings her into the tent of Sarah and his mother, took Rebekah. She became his wife, and he loved her. And so Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So that is the end of this. That is the end of our class. So we've gotten through chapter 24. I know we got through a lot of stuff, and if you got any questions, again, send me a text, send me an email, whatever you want to do. I would be happy to answer those. And if you want to privately, that's fine. If you just want to say, hey, I got a question, I'll be happy to answer it privately. But if you got them, if you want to wait until Monday, I will be there Monday. My voice will be in fine fettle, and I will be feeling a whole lot better. I appreciate if you would pray for that. And I think that's everything. I hope everybody has a great evening, morning, whenever you're watching this. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and we will see you next week. Thanks, guys. God bless.